Okay, so my article critique is over an article by Brenda Brenner and Catherine Strand called A Case Study of Teaching Musical Expression to Young Performers, and it's from the Journal of Research in Music Education. Sorry. This study opens up with them explaining what musical expression is, and one of the definitions that I found is that they said it was an appropriate deviation from the norms of tempo, dynamic level, articulation, and tone quality. And they go through the introduction listing out more definitions by different people and different authors. And they also mention a longitudinal study that was done in 2008 or reported in 2008 by Lisboa. And it's a longitudinal study about cello players and how they learn and the techniques that were used to teach them. And it mentioned how they learned expressiveness within their lessons. It didn't say whether they had learned it vicariously or whether they had been specifically taught it. But the main questions that they were asking in this study that was being done for the article are: how do the teachers define musical expression? Did they believe that young performers could be taught musical expression? And what were the characteristics of an expressive performance that these teachers could describe or demonstrate within their own instructions? The study was done in a collective case style, which means that there were several different case studies that were being done, and they were all trying to answer the same question. And they had 5 different teachers, which they gathered from a snowball effect. They asked one teacher who they thought would be a good match for the study, and just different teachers if they had the similar opinions or different opinions from their own. And they ended up with 2 teachers from the same group, and they didn't list any names, so they were given letters. So teacher A and teacher E were from the same string program. The teacher A had been there for 35 years, and teacher E didn't say how long, but it did mention that she was a cello player. Teacher B was a piano and voice teacher who had an undergrad and graduate degree in music performance. Sorry. Teacher C was a violinist who had a PhD in music education, and teacher D was a jazz trumpeter who had his own studio. And the data was collected in the form of interviews, and they asked each teacher the research question. So, do you believe that they can be taught musical expression? What is musical expression, and how would you teach it? They also asked the students, because each of the 5 teachers was supposed to select 3 students. And they asked the students the same questions, or at least the question of what is musical expression, and they couldn't really articulate it, so they morely used the students' answers to back up what the teachers had already said. Once they had the interviews done for 4 of the teachers, they continued on. They used A, B, D, and E. They omitted C. It did not give a reason why they omitted this teacher, but they did not continue on with this teacher. Once they had done the interviews, they did field observations for the other 4 teachers. And once all that data was collected, they organized it using different coding methods to get 4 different uh, sections that it was organized under. And they are the definitions of expressiveness, a child-specific teaching strategies, considerations for learner development, and pedagogical practice for teaching musical expressiveness, as quoted by the authors. Overall, they did find that the teachers held similar beliefs, but their teaching styles were vastly different from each other. The authors compared it to chefs using the same recipe, but what you get, the end product, is different, and how they cook it is different from each other. And I thought that was a really interesting metaphor. Each teacher described somewhat similar in saying that musical expression is a technical skill, which is singing, playing with a good tone and correct notes, along with creativity. And they also said that it was a physical flexibility and connection to the instruments. And the methods that the teachers used were, as I said earlier, they were different from each other. While teacher D stressed the physical and cognitive aspect to teaching music expressiveness, teachers C and E focused more on how life experiences could help teach expressiveness, and that's what they said they would have done or they would do when they were teaching. All the teachers said that they would use repetition with children and not so much with adults, but that they would use it with children because they had more patience, or they believed they had more patience than the adults. And they also adapted all of their lessons to fit children and to fit their way of thinking and their way of learning. Whether the lesson plans were for adults or already for children, they adapted it for the age group of the children that they were teaching for this study. And they also believed that they found ways to motivate their kids to learn, and they would model or sing directions instead of speak them or give oral directions. And it also mentioned how teachers A and E had a number of teaching years behind them, so they already had experience, and they would use one strategy to teach a number of instructional goals and achieve them, while teacher B and D would move almost methodically, from one instructional goal to the next instructional goal. And they all believed that the younger performers could be taught musical expressiveness, and they thought it was easier because the children had more of a flexibility, and they weren't so worried as whether I was playing this right or playing this wrong, or they didn't have the physical limitations and rigidness, the authors said, that adults do. They were more willing to let go of the rules and be expressive. And the teachers all taught in a similar way, with the belief of that the voice was one of the easiest ways to experience the expression early on, and they taught the students to make a connection between the literature and the structure first, and then make a connection with the emotion, and then make a connection with the audience. And each of those, within those, they had their own different practices, but those were the main frame of what they were teaching overall. I thought this was a very good study, and it was very good and it's a very good teaching resource because when it goes back and talks about how they were making a connection between each of the 3 items, they had little stories that gave an application to the instructional material that they were just describing. So I thought it was really good, and it made it a really strong article and something that I'll keep forever to use in my own teaching. And I'm not sure they really could have added anything else to make it stronger. Alright, that's it. Thank you.